Continuing with Harper Lee's famous book, To Kill a Mockingbird. This is chapter 9. You can't just take that back, boy. This order, given to me by Cecil Jacobs, was the beginning of a rather thin time for Jim and me. My fists were clenched and I was ready to let fly. Atticus had promised me he would wear me out if he had ever heard of me fighting anymore. I was far too old and too big for such childish things, and the sooner I learned to hold in, the better off everybody would be. I soon forgot. Cecil Jacobs made me forget. He had announced in the schoolyard the day before that Scout Finch's daddy defended N-word. I deny it, but told Jim. What do you mean saying that? I asked. Nothing, Jim said. Ask Atticus, he'll tell you. Do you defend N-word, Atticus? N-words? The derogatory term towards black people, Atticus? I asked him that evening. Of course I do. And don't say the N-word, Scout. That's common. It's what everyone at school says. From now on, it will be everyone less one. Well, if you don't want me to grow up talking that way, why'd you send me to school? My father looked at me mildly, amusement in his eyes. Despite our compromise, my campaign to avoid school had continued in one form or another since my first day's dose of it. The beginning of last September had brought on sinking spells, dizziness, and mild gastric complaints. I went so far as to pay a nickel for the privilege of rubbing my head against the head of Miss Rachel's cook's son, who was afflicted with a tremendous ringworm. It didn't take. But I was worrying another bone. Do all lawyers defend Negroes, Atticus? Of course they do, Scout. And why did Cecil say you defend N-word? He made it sound like you were running a sill. Atticus sighed. I'm still defending a black person. His name's Tom Robinson. He lives in the little settlement beyond the town dump. He's a member of Calpurnia's church, and Cal knows his family well. She says they're clean-living folks, Scout. You aren't old enough to understand some things yet, but there's been some high talk around town to the effect that I shouldn't do much about defending this man. It's a peculiar case. It won't come to trial until the summer session. John Taylor was kind enough to give us a postponement. If you shouldn't be defending him, then why are you doing it? For a number of reasons, said Atticus. The main one is I couldn't hold up my head in town. I couldn't represent this county in the legislature. I couldn't even tell you or Jim not to do something again. You mean if you didn't defend the man, Jim and me wouldn't have to mind you anymore? That's about right. Why? Because I could never ask you to mind me again, Scout, simply by the nature of the work. Every lawyer gets at least one case in their lifetime that affects him personally. This one's mine, I guess. You might hear some ugly talk about it at school, but do one thing for me if you will. You just hold your head high and keep those fists down. No matter what anybody says to you, don't let them change your goat. Try fighting with your head for a change. It's a good one, even if it does resist learning. Atticus, are we going to win? No, honey. Then why? Simply because we were licked 100 years before we started, for no reason for us not to try to win, Atticus said. You sound like Cousin Ike Finch, I said. Cousin Ike Finch was Macon County's sole surviving Confederate veteran. He wore a General Hood-type beard of which he was inordinately vain. At least once a year, Atticus, Jim, and I called him, and I would have to kiss him. It was horrible. Jim and I would listen respectfully to Atticus and Cousin Ike rehash the war. Tell you, Atticus, Cousin Ike would say, the Missouri Compromise war licked us, but if I had to go through it again, I'd walk every step of the whole way, and every step back, just like I did before, and furthermore, we'd whip 'em this time. Now in 1864, when Stonewall Jackson came around by, I beg your pardon, young folks. Old Blue Light was in heaven there. God rest his saintly brow. Come here, Scout, said Atticus. I crawled into his lap and tucked my head under his chin. He put his arms around me and rocked me gently. It's different this time, he said. This time we aren't fighting the Yankees, we're fighting our friends. But remember this, no matter how bitter things get, they're still our friends, and this is still our house. With that in mind, I faced Cecil Jacobs in the schoolyard the next day. You gonna take that back, boy? You gotta make me first, he yelled. My folks said your daddy was a disgrace and that an N-word ought to hang from the water tank. I drew a bead on him, remembered what Atticus had said, then dropped my fist and walked away. Scout's a coward, ringing in my ears. It was the first time I ever walked away from a fight. Somehow, if I fought Cecil, I would let Atticus down. Atticus so rarely asked Jim and me to do something for him. I could take being called a coward for him. I felt extremely noble for having remembered, and remained noble for 3 weeks. Then Christmas came and disaster struck. Jim and I viewed Christmas with mixed feelings. The good side was that the tree and Uncle Jack Finch. Every Christmas Eve, we met Uncle Jack in Macon Junction, and he would spend a week with us. A flip of the coin revealed the uncompromising lineaments of Aunt Alexandra and Frances. I suppose I should include Uncle Jimmy, Aunt Alexandra's husband, but as he never spoke a word to me in life except to say, "Get off the fence," once, I never saw any reason to take notice of him. Neither did Aunt Alexandra. Long ago, in a burst of friendliness, Auntie and Uncle Jimmy produced a son named Henry, who left him home as soon as he was humanly possible, married, and produced Frances. Henry and his wife deposited Frances at his grandparents every Christmas and then pursued their own pleasures. No amount of sighing could induce Atticus to let us spend Christmas Day at home. We went to Finch's Landing every Christmas in my memory. The fact that Auntie was a good cook was some compensation for being forced to spend a religious holiday with Francis Hancock. He was a year older than I, and I avoided him on principle. He enjoyed everything I disapproved of, and disliked my ingenuous diversions. Aunt Alexandra was Atticus' sister, but when Jim told me about changelings and siblings, I decided that she had been swapped at birth, that my grandparents had perhaps received a Crawford instead of a Finch. Had I ever harbored the mystical notions about mountains that seemed to obsess lawyers and judges, Aunt Alexandra would have me be analogous to Mount Everest. Throughout my early life, she was cold in there. When Uncle Jack jumped down from the train Christmas Eve day, we had to wait for the porter to hand the 2 long packages. Jim and I always thought it was funny when Uncle Jack pecked Atticus on the cheek. They were the only 2 men we ever saw kiss each other. Uncle Jack shook hands with Jim and swung me high, but not high enough. Uncle Jack was a head shorter than Atticus, the baby of the family. He was younger than Aunt Alexandra. He and Auntie looked alike, but Uncle Jack made us use of his face. We weren't never wary of his sharp nose and chin. He was one of the few men of science who would never terrify me. Probably he never behaved like a doctor. Whenever he performed a minor service for Jim and me, as removing a splinter from a foot, he would tell us exactly what he was going to do, give us an estimation of how much it would hurt, and explain the use of any tongs he employed. One Christmas I lurked in corners nursing a twisted splinter in my foot, perhaps permitting no one to come near me. When Uncle Jack caught me, he kept me laughing about a preacher who hated going to church so much that every day he stood at his gate in the dressing gown smoking a hookah and delivering 5-minute sermons to any passerbys who desired spiritual comfort. I interrupted to make Uncle Jack let me know when he would pull it out, but he held up a bloody splinter and a pair of tweezers and said he yanked it out while I was laughing. That was well known as relativity. "What's in those packages?" I asked him, pointing to the long thin parcels the porter had given him. "None of your business," he said. Jim said, "How's Rose Ulmer?" Rose Ulmer was Uncle Jack's cat. She was a beautiful yellow female Uncle Jack said was one of the few women he could stand permanently. He reached into his coat pocket and brought out some snapshots. We admired them. "She's getting fat," I said. "I should think so. She eats all the leftover fingers and ears from the hospital." "Oh, that's a damn story," I said. "I beg your pardon?" Atticus said, "Don't pay attention to her, Jack. She's trying you out. Cal says she's been cursing fluently for a week now." Uncle Jack raised his eyebrows and said nothing. I was proceeding on the dim theory, aside from the innate attractiveness of such words, that if Atticus discovered I had picked him up at school, he wouldn't make me go. But at supper that evening, when I asked him to pass the damn ham, please, Uncle Jack pointed at me. "See me afterwards, young lady," he said. "Pass the damn ham." When supper was over, Uncle Jack went into the living room and sat down. He slapped his thigh for me to come sit on his lap. I liked to smell him. He was like a bottle of alcohol and smelled something pleasantly sweet. He pushed back my bangs and looked at me. "You're more like Atticus than your mother," he said. "You're also growing out of your pants a little. I reckon they fit all right. You like words like damn and hell now, don't you?" I said I reckon so. "Well, I don't," said Uncle Jack. "Not unless there's extreme provocation connected with them. I'll be here a week, and I don't want to hear any of those words while I'm here. Scout, you'll get in trouble if you go around saying things like that. You want to grow up to be a lady, don't you?" I said, "Not particularly." "Of course you do. Now let's get to the tree." We decorated the tree until bedtime. That night I dreamed of 2 long packages for Jim and me. Next morning, Jim and I divvied for them. They were from Atticus, who had written Uncle Jack to get them for us, and they were what we had asked for. "Don't point them in the house," said Atticus when Jim aimed a picture on the wall. You'll have to teach him to shoot, said Uncle Jack. That's your job, said Atticus. I merely bowed to the inevitable. It took Atticus's courtroom voice to drag us away from the tree. He declined to let us take our air rifles to the landing. I had already begun thinking of shooting Francis, and said if we made one false move, he'd take them away from us for good. Finch's Landing consisted of 367 steps down a high bluff and ending in a jetty. Farther downstream, below the bluff, were traces of an old cotton landing where Negroes had loaded bale and produce, unloaded blocks of ice, flour, sugar, farm equipment, and feminine apparel. A two-rut road from the riverside and vanished among the dark trees. At the end of the road was a two-storied white house with porches circling it upstairs and downstairs. In its old age, our ancestor Simon Finch had built it to please his nagging wife, but with the porches all resemblance to ordinary houses of its era ended. The internal arrangements of the Finch house were indicative of Simon's guilelessness and the absolute trust with which he regarded his offspring. There were 6 bedrooms upstairs, 4 for the 8 female children, 1 for Welcome Finch, the sole son, and 1 for visiting relatives. Simple enough, but the daughters' rooms could be reached only by one staircase. Welcome's room and the guest room only by another. The daughter's staircase was in the ground floor bedroom of their parents, so Simon always knew the hours of his daughter's nocturnal comings and goings. There was a kitchen separate from the rest of the house, tacked onto by a wooden catwalk. In the backyard was a rusty bell on a pole, used to summon field hands or as a distress signal. A widow's walk was on the roof, but no widow's walk there from it. Simon oversaw his overseer, watched the riverboats, and gazed into the lives of surrounding landholders. There went with the house the unusual legend about the Yankees. One Finch female, recently engaged, donned her complete trousseau to save it from raiders in the neighborhood. She became stuck to the door to the daughter's staircase, but was doused with water and finally pushed through. When we arrived at the landing, Aunt Alexandra kissed Uncle Jack. Francis kissed Uncle Jack. Uncle Jimmy shook hands silently with Uncle Jack. Jim and I gave our presents to Francis, who gave us a present. Jim felt his age and gravitated to the adults, leaving me to entertain our cousin. Francis was 8 and slicked back his hair. "What'd you get for Christmas?" I asked politely. "Just what I asked for," he said. Francis had requested a pair of knee pants, a red leather book set, 5 shirts, and an untied bow tie. "That's nice," I lied. "Jim and me got air rifles," said Jim, and Jim got a chemistry set. Jim and me got air rifles, and Jim got a chemistry set. This is Scout talking. "A toy one, I reckon." "No, a real one. He's going to make me some invisible ink and I'm going to write the deal on it." Francis asked what was the use of that. "Well, can't you see his face when he gets a letter from me with nothing on it? It'll drive him nuts." Talking to Francis gave me the sensation of settling slowly to the bottom of the ocean. He was the most boring child I ever met. As he lived in Mobile, he could not inform me on to school authorities. But he managed to tell everything he knew to Aunt Alexandra, who in turn unburdened herself to Atticus, who either forgot it or gave me hell, whichever struck his fancy. But the only time I ever heard Atticus speak sharply to anyone was when I heard him say, "Sister, I do the best with them. I had something to do with my going around in overalls." I think it had something to do with me going around in overalls. Aunt Alexandra was fanatical on the subject of my attire. I could not possibly hope to be a lady if I wore breeches. When I said I could do nothing in a dress, she said I wasn't supposed to be doing things that required pants. Aunt Alexandra's vision of my deportment involving playing with small toes, tea sets, wearing the Adder-pearl necklace she gave me when I was born. Furthermore, I should be a ray of sunshine in my father's lonely life. I suggested that one could be a ray of sunshine in pants just as well, but Auntie said that one had to behave like a sunbeam, that I was born good but had grown progressively worse every year. She hurt my feelings and set my teeth permanently on edge, but when I asked Atticus about it, he said there were already enough sunbeams in the family and I could go about my business. He didn't mind me much the way I was. On Christmas dinner, I sat at the little table in the dining room. Jim and Francis sat with the adults at the dining table. Auntie had continued to isolate me long after Jim and Francis graduated to the big table. I often wondered what she thought I'd do, get up and throw something. I sometimes thought of asking her if she would just let me sit at the big table with the rest of them just once. I would prove to her how civilized I could be. After all, I ate at home every day with no major mishaps. When I begged Atticus to use his influence, he said he had none. We were guests, and we sat where she told us to sit. He also said Aunt Alexandra didn't understand girls much. She never had one. But her cooking made up for everything. 3 kinds of meat, summer vegetables from her pantry shelves, peach pickles, 2 kinds of cake, ambrosia constituted a modest Christmas dinner. Afterwards, the adults made for the living room and sat around in a dazed condition. Jim lay on the floor and I went in the backyard. "Put on your coat," said Atticus dreamily, so I didn't hear him. Francis sat beside me in the back steps. "That was the best yet," I said. "Grandma's a wonderful cook," said Francis. "She's going to teach me how." "Boys don't cook." I giggled at the thought of Jim in an apron. "Grandma said all men should learn to cook, that men ought to be careful with their wives and wait on them when they don't feel good," said my cousin. "I don't want Dill waiting on me," I said. "I'd rather wait on him." "Dill?" "Yeah, don't say anything about it yet, but we're going to get married as soon as we're big enough. He asked me last summer." Francis hooted. "What's the matter with him?" I asked. "Ain't anything the matter with him." "You mean that little runt Grandma says stays with Miss Rachel every summer?" "That's exactly who I mean." "I know all about him," said Francis. "What about him?" "Grandma said he hasn't got a home. Has to. He lives in Meridian. He just gets passed around from relative to relative, and Miss Rachel keeps him every summer." "Francis, that's not so." Francis grinned at me. "You're mighty dumb sometimes, Jean Louise. Guess you don't know any better, though, don't you? If Uncle Atticus lets you run around with stray dogs, that's his own business, like Grandma says. So it ain't your fault. I guess it ain't your fault if Atticus is a inward lover besides, but I'm here to tell you it certainly doesn't mortify the rest of the family." "Francis, what the hell do you mean?" "Just what I said. Grandma says it's bad enough he lets you all run wild, but now it's your turn to be an inward lover. We'll never be able to walk the streets and make him again. He's running the family, that's what he's doing." Francis rose and sprinted down the catwalk to the old kitchen. At a safe distance, he called out, "He's nothing but an inward lover." "He is not," I roared. "I don't know what you're talking about, but you better cut it out with this red-hot minute." I leaped off the steps and ran down the catwalk. It wasn't easy to call her Francis. I sat to take it back real quick. Francis just looked and sped in the kitchen. "Inward lover," he yelled. "When stalking one's prey, it is best to take one's time. Say nothing, and as sure as eggs, he will become curious and emerge." Francis appeared in the kitchen door. "You still mad, Jean Louise?" he asked tentatively. "Nothing to speak of," I said. Francis came out on the catwalk. "You gonna take it back, Francis?" But I was too quick on the draw. Francis shot back into the kitchen, so I retired to the steps. I could wait patiently. I had sat there perhaps 5 minutes when I heard Aunt Alexandra speak. "Where's Francis?" "He's out yonder in the kitchen. He knows he's not supposed to play in there." Francis came to the door and yelled, "Grandma, she's got me in here and she won't let me out." "What is all this, Jean Louise?" I looked up at Aunt Alexandra. "I haven't got him in there, Auntie. I ain't holding him." "Yes, she is," shouted Francis. "She won't let me out." "Have you all been fussing?" Jean Louise got mad at me. "Grandma," called Francis. "Francis, come out of there. Jean Louise, if I hear another word out of you, I'll tell your father. Did I hear you say it a while ago?" "No." "I thought I did. I better not hear it again." Aunt Alexandra was a back porch listener. The moment she was out of sight, Francis came out ahead and grinning. "Don't you fool me," he said. He jumped into the yard and kept his distance, kicking turfs of grass, turning around occasionally to smile on it. Jim appeared on the porch, looked at us, and went away. Francis climbed the mimosa tree, came down, put his hands in his pockets, and strolled around the yard. "Ha," he said. "I asked him who he thought he was, Uncle Jack. Francis said he reckoned I got told, for me just sit there and leave him alone." "I ain't bothering you," I said. Francis looked at me carefully, concluded that I had been sufficiently subdued, and crooned softly, "Inward lover." This time I split my knuckle to the bone on his front teeth. My left impaired, I sailed it with my right. But not for long. Uncle Jack pinned my arms to my side and said, "Stand still." This is such a precocious young person. Awesome. Aunt Alexandra ministered to Francis, wiping his tears away with her handkerchief, rubbing his hair, patting his cheek. Atticus, Jim, and Uncle Jim had come to the back porch when Francis started yelling. "Who started this?" said Uncle Jack. Francis and I pointed at each other. "Grandma," he bawled. "She called me a whore lady and jumped on me." "Is that true, Scout?" said Uncle Jack. "I reckon so." When Uncle Jack looked down at me, his features were like Aunt Alexandra's. "You know, I told you he'd get in trouble if he used those words, like, I told you, didn't I?" "Yes, sir, but..." "Well, you're in trouble now. Stay there." I was debating whether to stand there or run, and tarried in the decision a moment too long. I turned to flee, but Uncle Jack was quicker. I found myself suddenly looking at a tiny ant struggling with a breadcrumb in the grass. "I'll never speak to you as long as I live. I hate you and despise you and hope you die tomorrow." A statement that seemed to encourage Uncle Jack more than anything. I ran to Atticus for comfort, but he said I had it coming and it was high time we went home. I climbed in the backseat of the car without saying goodbye to anyone, and at home I ran to my room and slammed the door. Jim tried to say something nice, but I wouldn't let him. When I surveyed the damage, there were only 7 or 8 red marks, and I was reflecting upon relativity when someone knocked on the door. I asked who it was. Uncle Jack answered. Go away. Uncle Jack said if I talked like that, he'd lick me again, so I was quiet. When he entered the room, I retreated to a corner and turned my back on him. Scout, he said, do you still hate me? Go on, please, sir. Why, I don't think you'd hold it against me, he said. I'm disappointed in you. You had that coming, and you know it. Didn't either? Honey, you can't go around calling people. You ain't fair, I said. You ain't fair. Uncle Jack's eyebrows went up. Not fair? How not? You're real nice, Uncle Jack, and I reckon I love you even after what you did, but you don't understand children much. Uncle Jack put his hands on his hips and looked down at me. And why do I not understand children, Miss Jean Louise? Such conduct as yours required little understanding. It was obstreperous, disorderly, and abusive. You gonna give me a chance to tell you? I don't mean to sass you, I'm just trying to tell you. Uncle Jack sat down on the bed. His eyebrows came together, and he peered up from under them. Proceed, he said. I took a deep breath. Well, in the first place, you never stopped to give me a chance to tell you my side of it. You just lit right into me when Jim and I fuss at Atticus doesn't ever just listen to Jim's side of it. He hears mine too. And in the second place, you never told me we'd use those words like an accepting extreme provocation. And Francis provoked me enough to knock his block off. Uncle Jack scratched his head. What was your side of it, Scout? Francis called Atticus something, and I wasn't about to take it from him. What did he call him? An N-word lover. I ain't sure what it means, but the way Francis said it, tell you one thing right now, Uncle Jack, I'll swear to God, I'll sit there and let him call something about Atticus. He called Atticus that? Yes, sir, he did, and a lot more, said Atticus. Be the rumination of the family, and he let Jim and me wild. From the look on Uncle Jack's face, I thought I was in for it again when he said, well, we'll see about this. I knew Francis was in for it. I've got a good mind to go out there tonight. Please, sir, just let it go, please. I've no intention of letting it go, he said. Alexander should know about this. The idea of, wait till I get my hands on that boy. Uncle Jack, please promise me something. Please, sir, promise you won't tell Atticus about this. He asked me one time not to let anything I heard about him make me mad, and I'd rather him think we were fighting about something else instead. Please promise. But I don't like Francis getting away with something like that. He didn't. You reckon you could tie up my hand? It's still bleeding some. Of course I will, baby. I know it's no hand I would be more delighted to tie up. Will you come this way? Uncle Jack gallantly bowed me to the bathroom while he cleaned and bandaged my knuckles. He entertained me with a tale about a funny nearsighted old gentleman who had a cat named Hodge, and he counted all the cracks on the sidewalk when he went to town. There now, he said. You'll have a very unladylike scar on your wedding ring finger. Thank you, sir, Uncle Jack. Ma'am, what's a whore lady? Uncle Jack plunged into another long tale about an old prime minister who sat in the House of Commons and blew feathers in the air and tried to keep them there, and all about how men were losing their heads. I guess he was trying to answer my question, but he made no sense whatsoever. Later, when I was supposed to be in bed, I went down to have a call for a drink of water, and Atticus and Uncle Jack were in the living room. I shall never marry, Atticus. Why? I might have children. Atticus said, You'll learn a lot to learn then, Jack. I know, your daughter gave me first lessons this afternoon. She said I didn't understand children much and told me why. She was quite right, Atticus. She told me how I should have treated her. Oh dear, I'm so sorry I wronged her. Atticus chuckled. She earned it, so don't feel too remorseful. I waited on tenter hooks for Uncle Jack to tell Atticus my side of it, but he didn't. He simply murmured, Her use of bathroom invective leaves nothing to the imagination, but she doesn't know the meaning of half what she says. She asked me what a whore lady was. Did you tell her? No, I told her about Lord Melbourne. Jack, when a child asks you something, answer him for goodness sake, but don't make a production of it. Children are children, but they can spot an evasion quicker than adults, and evasion simply muddles them. No, my father mused. You had the right to answer that this afternoon, but the wrong reasons. Bad language is the stage all children go through, and it dies with time when they learn that they're not attracting attention with it. Hotheadness isn't it. Scout's got to learn to keep her head and learn soon, with what's in store for her. These next few months, she's coming along though, Jim. She's getting older, and she's following an example a good bit now. All she needs is an assistant sometimes. Atticus, you've never laid a hand on her, I admit that. So far I've been able to go without just threats, Jack. She minds me very as well as she can. Doesn't come up to scratch half the time, but she tries. That's not the answer, said Uncle Jack. No, the answer is she knows I know she tries. That's what makes the difference. What bothers me is that she and Jim will have to absorb some ugly things pretty soon. I'm not worried about Jim keeping his head, but Scout, just as soon as jump on someone, has to look at him in a pride at stake. I waited for Uncle Jack to break his promise. He still didn't. Atticus, how bad is this going to be? You ain't had too much chance to discuss it. It couldn't be worse, Jack. The only thing we've got is a black man's word against the Ewells. The evidence boils down to you did it. The jury couldn't possibly be expected to take Tom Robinson's word against the Ewells. Are you acquainted with the Ewells? Uncle Jack said yes, he remembered them. He described them to Atticus, but Atticus said, "You're a generation off. The present ones are the same, though." "What are they going to do then?" "Before I'm through, I intend to jar up the jury a bit. I think we'll have a reasonable chance on appeal, though. I really can't tell at this stage, Jack. You know, I hope to get through life without a case of this kind, but John Taylor pointed at me and said, 'You're it. Let the cup pass from you, eh?' Right. But do you think I could face my children otherwise? You know what's going to happen as well as I do, Jack, and I hope and pray I can get Jim and Scout through without bitterness, and most of all, without catching Macon's usual disease. Why reasonable people go stark raving mad when anything involving a Negro comes up is just something I pretend I don't understand. I just hope that Jim and Scout come to me for the answers instead of listening to the town. I hope they trust me enough, Jean Louise." My scalp jumped. I stuck my head around the corner, sir. "Go to bed." I scurried to my room and went to bed. Uncle Jack was a prince of a fellow not to let me down, but I never figured out how Atticus knew I was listening. And if it was, until many years later that I realized he wanted me to hear every word he said. That Atticus, he's just so straight up with his kids. That was chapter 9. There's a Chinese proverb that I was reminded of, and it's, a wise man makes up his own decision, and the fool goes with the crowd. And that's something to think about in this chapter. That was chapter 9 of this great book, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. If you enjoyed reading that, if you enjoyed that as much as I did, click the thumbs up button. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. I'm going to update this channel. I appreciate all the comments you guys have been leaving, and feel free to write any more comments about this book or any of the other books. If you have any suggestions for anything you'd like me to read, go ahead and leave it. Once again, thanks for watching, and have a nice day.